Nick having a contrarian opinion about this one event and whether or not Israel had its hand in it, the very same night, the next day, the next day, the next day, and even on Patrick Bet-David's interview, Nick reiterated all of the same points. That Jewish influence, the foreign nation of Israel, these things are subverting the agenda of America first. They are not good for white people. They are not good for Christians, and they're not good for America. Oh, but he got the call. Okay, so he got the call, and the call was an agreement that what? You're not going to blame Israel for Charlie Kirk, but you're going to continue to talk about Talmudic rabbinic Judaism being anti-Christian, and you're going to continue to talk about race realism and how white civilization must be protected, our countries must be majority white, led by white people. That's the agreement that the Mossad made with Nick. That's what they paid him $150 million to agree to. How does that make sense?
The destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Good afternoon and welcome to Beholden To Truth. It is your humble host, Joshua, here with you for another one of our happy hour sessions, sitting outside of the gym, sipping our pre-workout, getting caffeinated, got ourselves a leg day on our hands, on our legs. Not looking forward to that. It's gloomy out. It's been raining for the last couple of days, but you got to get it done. Anyway, lots to talk about today, you guys. The big interview that I predicted would happen just happened, I think, the day before yesterday. I think it was around last month where I did a vlog talking about some of the back and forth drama between Nick and Patrick Bet-David that was happening via Twitter, where Nick was calling him out saying, hey, some of these excuses you're making about not allowing me to come and do an interview on your show are honestly completely bunk. And those excuses first started with, oh, well, Nick uses the N word, and I just don't platform people who use that word. And then everybody quickly pointed out to Patrick Bet-David, yeah, you had Andrew Tate on your show, and he uses that word all the time. So then the goalpost got moved to, well, the way Nick talks on his show, on his own platform, after he goes on these interviews is not something I condone. You know, he cleans himself up and he's respectable on these large interviews like Candace Owens, Bradley Martin, whoever else. But then a lot of times he goes back on his own platform and uses certain rhetoric, certain language that I don't think is good for public discourse on politics. And so they went back and forth over this matter. And in the vlog that I recorded last month, I said, honestly, I think there's going to be enough public pressure. And just based on Patrick Bet-David's character, I think he probably will eventually succumb to the Groypers and platform Nick and have a fair discussion with him. And lo and behold, here we are 2 days out from that. Even though I know for a fact he doesn't support all of our core mission, I think he is an intelligent man, and I think he wants the ability to say that he really does value free speech, and especially with the added pressure of the rising Groypers and the rising America First movement. But I think Patrick Bet-David is a little bit different, a little more open-minded. He's not going to agree, but I think at a minimum he will say, your ability to articulate these subjects and your right of freedom of speech are valuable. I think people will appreciate the conversation. And even while I don't agree about certain things, I'll platform you. I'll have the conversation. I think we're actually going to reach that point. That's just my guess. We're gonna find out if I'm right about that or not. And the interview was pretty tame, I would say. I think a lot of people, when they see Nick's clips on Instagram, Twitter, wherever else, and they see the most sensational moments, the most boisterous language and so on and so forth, the racial slurs and a lot of the funnier takes, but are also a bit insensitive or crude, they kind of assume that that's who he is everywhere he goes, including on large platforms. And that's why he shouldn't be allowed on large platforms, because he speaks that way. But that just goes to show that they haven't actually watched Nick on any large platforms, or whenever he goes on interviews, debates, and so on. When he goes on those other people's platforms, he's always respectable and he brings down the rhetoric quite a bit and speaks calmly, rationally, intelligently. And so this was clearly what I expected him to do if he were to be on Patrick Bet David. I knew it wasn't going to be the America First show. And so that is exactly what we saw. And some people were happy with this, some weren't. Most of the Groypers, if you watch the Patrick Bet David interview, you didn't hear anything you haven't already heard before, especially if you're up on the lore, if you've been following Nick for years like I have, then you already know the origin story, the Cassie Dillon stuff, the Ben Shapiro stuff. You already know about the January 6th stuff. You know about getting debanked, deplatformed, banned across the entire internet, credit card processors, federal no-fly list. You know all of the greatest hits. You've heard these things before. But the intent of that interview was not to go on and break new ground and say things he hadn't said before. It was to introduce Nick to a very, very large audience of Valuetainment and everybody that follows Patrick Bet David and that whole business. It was to, for the first time, see Nick outside of the viral clips and hear where his positions really came from. What is his origin story? Why is he so obsessed with, quote, the Jews? What's his stance on the racial thing? What did he just was he a victim to black crime growing up? Were his parents super racist? Why is he this character that we all know him as? So that was honestly, it's like an hour and a half interview, and I would say 50 to 60 minutes of it was devoted to Nick starting out at literally 12 years old. The very first political books he ever read, Milton Friedman, and laying out year by year, even month by month, his maturing and his understanding of global politics and spirituality and how they are inextricably tied. And so laying out that backstory for the very large audience of Patrick Bet David's following was a very good thing. No, it wasn't like the most funny or the most red pilling or anything else like that. It was humanizing, which is what we need. If Nick is going to lead the America First movement and it's going to scale nationwide to tens of millions of supporters, then people need to understand that this is just a guy, okay? And he's a guy who, from his teenage years, came up against the principalities, the biblical principalities, those who plot and scheme behind closed doors, those who are possessed with evil to stifle truth and to stifle Christendom, those who are anti-white in this case. He came up against those powers at the very young age of 18 years old, and they have done everything in their power to smother him in the cradle. And it has been a continuous battle, like Sisyphus trying to get the boulder up the hill, dealing with all the censorship and the hit jobs, the slander campaigns, the paid character assassinations like the influenceable thing. Those who have watched Nick for years know all of this backstory. But those who have watched Nick for years are the fringe minority of the population. So we got to catch millions of people up to speed. And that was really the intent of the Patrick Bet David interview. So all things told, I think it went great. And it's a lot of respect to Patrick Bet David for listening to the people. The people told him, we want Nick. And they were finally given what they asked for. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I think we should celebrate this moment in time. The mainstreaming of Nick. He is owed this. He's owed a seat at the table. All of his views are morally unimpeachable and biblically unimpeachable. And so this is his time. And we need to respect that. And we need to give the fair kudos to everybody who has helped him along this way, especially those who gave him a platform before October 7th, before it became normal to criticize Israel, to talk about Zionism, back when these things were extremely socially taboo and were automatically conflated with anti-Semitism, irrational hatred of all Jews. Those early people like Myron Gaines and Pearl Davis and many others who gave Nick a voice before it was legitimized in the mainstream due to the atrocities of Israel post-October 7th, a lot of those people owe respect, and ongoing. Everybody who has platformed Nick since then, we owe gratitude to those people, So I don't have that much more. Well, I guess there's a couple things on the Patrick Bet David interview. right now there is this narrative that Nick, because he is going mainstream, he is softening his positions to be more palatable to the mass, to be more palatable to the masses. I don't think that's the case. And those people who are clipping him in 30, 60-second intervals, whether it's on his show or the interview we did with Patrick Bet-David or other places, to put forth that allegation, we need to be writing those names down. We need to be capturing receipts of everybody who is saying Nick has flipped. These are the same people who are saying Nick is a Fed, Nick is now a Democrat, Nick is a plant. The same people who are now saying, ooh, Nick got the call from Mossad, or Nick took the $150 million that they were going to give Charlie Kirk, or whatever else. We need to remember who these people are, not only for their lack of discernment, but for their lack of loyalty and trust. And so I've been involved in that fight over the last few days because that volume is being turned up. It's organized, it's intentional. Part of it is organic. This is somewhat inevitable due to the sheer numbers. As millions of more people are introduced to Nick, a lot of those millions are going to genuinely be low IQ, low information. They don't know the lore. They don't know the extent of the Jewish problem. They just have a problem with what Israel is doing right now. And they're not going to have the historical receipts of, for example, in 2022, when Nick took the contrarian stance against his own followers, against the entire conservative side of the spectrum, to say that Trump is not our guy. I'm not voting in 24 for Trump. I'm telling everybody who follows me not to vote for Trump. And this was him flip-flopping because he had previously been a Trump supporter in 2020 and 2016. And everybody said the same thing. Oh, flip-flop Nick. Now he's a Democrat. Now he's a federal plant to ruin the conservative movement. And now everybody agrees that Trump has sold out true conservative, true America First patriots.
Our country is at an inflection point. We can all feel it. And now is not the time to be a physically, mentally, or spiritually weak man. I've spent the last 10 years creating a blueprint for unfucking your life up. And it's a lot more than cleaning your room. How to achieve physical, mental, and spiritual mastery gives you a layman's understanding of how to master dieting and exercise, get the most out of your time, build ironclad mental fortitude, and leverage your faith to become a role model among men, something we desperately need right now in this time of war. I break down how to create a sustainable, flexible diet from scratch, how to organize your fitness routine, supplementation, and I dispel many myths and provide many red pills on dieting and exercise. The book is on sale right now at beholdentotruth.com for 20% off. Or you can get a free copy if you're a founding member of my Substack, which would also include a one-on-one 30-minute session with yours truly where you can ask me anything. Go to beholdentotruth.com right now to become the man that you were meant to be and the man that we desperately need you to be.
So, capturing the receipts of these people who are calling him a flip-flop or a betrayer, or now he's gotten the call from Mossad, or he's softening whatever, he's changing his stances. Very, very important that you write down the names of these people. And I've been doing this, and I've been sharing a couple of people, typically ones who have a larger audience, because those are the ones who can provide this misinformation or malinformation to their large platforms. I saw a couple on Instagram, a guy named Clayton Couture, who I believe is running for a spot in the House of Representatives, and Kenny Ko, very large influencer with like 500,000 followers, saying that Nick is flip-flop, Nick's gotten the call from the Jews, and so on and so forth. And so there's a subject within all of this and all of these allegations about Nick flip-flopping, where they take a clip from one of Nick's recent shows, where Nick talks about how everybody who is just reflexively blaming Israel or the Jews for Charlie Kirk's assassination are low IQ, low intelligence. And I said in a previous vlog, I don't love that response. It's not the words I would choose. I was one of the people who at first glance assumed it was probably Israel, and I still think it very well could be Israel. And Nick himself has said he's not excluding that as a possibility. He just doesn't see sufficient evidence for it at this point in time, all of it still being circumstantial. That phraseology of saying everybody who assumed it was Israel is just low IQ, they're not smart enough to keep up. As I said, I disagree with that, putting it that way. But at the same time, here's something to remind you guys. We are not women, okay? When somebody says something that offends you, hurts your feelings, insults you, talks about a characteristic, maybe it's a point of view that you have, or it's a hobby, or whatever. For example, Nick has talked countless times about bodybuilders and his criticism for them and those guys who are always in the gym. Nick has talked countless times about Southerners as a group, as a stereotype, and how they are really not the fabric of the people who we need, who will be the future leaders who get America back on track. Well, guess what? I'm a Southern bodybuilder, but I am still a devout America First supporter of Nick Fuentes. I don't care that he has insulted my personal hobby or my personal priorities. I don't care that he has disagreed with some of my reading of the tea leaves. I'm not personally insulted. I'm not in my feelings about it. Oh, he called me low IQ. He said bodybuilders are dumb. He said Southerners are dumb. Come on, guys, grow up. If he said that your political take that Israel did it is low IQ, okay, just disagree with him and move on. Don't stop watching him, because he's still by far the most informed on the history, present, and future of Jewish influence. You need to grow up and you need to man up. Don't take these things so personal, okay? Where I want to talk about specifically, though, there's two things. There's some stuff that Nick said on the Patrick Bet-David interview, and then there's the whole low IQ anti-Semitism comments that he's made. Let's knock out the Patrick Bet-David stuff first here. So let me quickly pull up my notes, because there's a few bullet points within the Patrick Bet-David interview that are being clipped by all these betrayers and Judases saying, look, Nick got the call. He's going soft. He's going mainstream. One to knock out really quickly. This just really aggravates me. He did an ad read on the show for some company that's kind of like a, what is that platform where celebrities, I think it's called Cameo, where celebrities allow people to pay to send them questions directly, recorded personal video response to them, whatever. Apparently there's a new platform for that, and Nick did an ad read for that. Literally like 5 seconds. Okay, and everybody's like, look, here it is. Nick is cashing out. Nick said he would never do ads, but here he is doing ads. Flip-flop Nick. Okay, listen. Political movements require very large amounts of capital to succeed. Did you know that? Is that like news to you? Where do you think large amounts of capital come from? And when I say large, I'm not talking about 500 grand. I'm not talking about $1 million or 2 million here and there. For a political party, especially one that's going to compete with the two-party system that has existed for your entire life, for that kind of political party to create itself and get in front of enough eyeballs, enough social media content, enough legacy media exposure, to get in front of that many people to simply state its positions, that requires tens of millions of dollars, if not even 100 million plus. And so where that money comes from, it's going to come from several different monetization vectors. It's going to come from doing ads. It's going to come from selling merchandise. It's going to come from selling membership programs like the America.Plus thing Nick stood up a couple months ago. All of these things are a necessity for a political movement. In order for Nick to organize all of the resources and the public exposure necessary to bring America First to a nationwide understanding of white identity, Christian nationalism, exposing Jewish influence, that takes millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay? Super chats are not enough to fund that. Selling some hats on America First is not enough to fund that. 1,000, 2,000 memberships on America.Plus is not enough to fund that. Yes, there's going to have to be some monetization behind America First. That means probably running some ads. That might mean doing some partnerships, collaborations. I'm sad that I have to even explain these things. I get met with the same accusations when I created my merch and apparel line, supplement line, my Substack for monthly memberships. Oh man, what a Jew. You're trying to, what do they say, grift off of the movement. It's like, actually, these things cost me money. To run Beholden To Truth for the last 4 years, I am minus $20,000 plus at this point. That's how much this platform has cost me to run. We are not remotely profitable. And that's despite the 3 different monetization efforts that I have stood up. I'm not going to be profitable for a very long time, and I'm okay with that. I've put my personal finances, the providence that God has blessed me with through my normal career, I have devoted those to this mission, and I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to seek profitability as the single highest priority. I'm trying to seek disclosure, exposure, understanding of what's going on from a spiritual point of view to this nation and defend all white people. That's my priority, even when it costs me money, even when it means getting fired from my job, even when it means losing friends and family members not wanting to talk to me, losing romantic opportunities, getting kicked out of church circles, and tens of thousands of dollars lost. That's how important it is to me. And so when I go and sell some shirts that are dedicated to the anti-Zog occupation, to Save Europa, that's me grifting. Okay, Nick running an ad to try to raise money for America First is Nick grifting. So that's where you have to understand all of these slants against Nick are they're coming from a position of bad faith. Sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes it's organized efforts such as the Influenceable campaign, #FedFuentes, that is literally a paid opposition program to undermine the progress of America First. There's many different ways that people who don't want Nick to succeed are going to try to put forth these narratives across social media to, as I said, undermine our progress. Another one of those is division within the ranks of America First. Find America First loyalists, people who love Nick, and then whisper in their ear, ooh, did you call that? Ooh, did you hear that when he called you low IQ because you just assumed Israel was behind Charlie Kirk? Ooh, are you really going to trust him to be the leader of America First when he's calling his own followers low IQ, low intelligence? Can you really trust him? Doesn't that hurt your feelings? Do you see how this works? They are trying to divide the ranks, and we can't let them do that. You have to be a grown man who understands that you're not going to agree with everything Nick says. Clearly, the priorities Nick has in his personal life are not necessarily the same priorities you have in your personal life. His political views and his understanding of everything as it relates to politics may not be in 100% congruency with you. Individual events that happen. I still disagree with Nick about the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting. I think that was clearly a staged hoax. I don't think Donald Trump was actually shot in the ear. I don't believe in the millimeter miracle. Guess what? I still followed Nick for the last year and a half since then, and I still support his work every single day. So disagreeing with him about whether or not Israel was involved with Charlie Kirk's assassination is no different. Maybe he is naive. Maybe I'm right and he is naive about staged hoaxes and events like this. Maybe he's right and I'm wrong, and it is the most obvious Occam's razor answer to the assassination. It is these extremely radical leftist groups who stir themselves up over fascism and tyranny, and all, they call Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk Hitler. And yeah, some of those people get so animated and crazed that they would do something like a political assassination. Sure, maybe that happened too. I don't 100% know. Nick doesn't 100% know. You don't 100% know. Even when you look at those who are saying it was clearly an assassination, had something to do with Israel, even within those ranks, they can't agree who the shooter was. Oh, was it the camera gun behind him that shot him? No. It was the people in the tunnel underneath him that shot him. No. Another one I saw today. Oh, the wireless mic that he had on was an explosive mic like the explosive pagers. No, 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 no. It was a palm gun from one of those guys doing the signals. No, no, no. It was a second sniper on one of the other roofs. Then you have those who are saying, no, he wasn't even shot. It was a staged hoax. Did you see the hologram chair? Do you see all the Freemason symbology and the numerology? Okay, so the division within the ranks, they're taking all three of the different possibilities and even dividing them within each other and having each other call each other stupid and low IQ and blah, blah, blah. We can't allow that division. We have to agree to disagree, but see the big picture, no matter which take you have on Charlie Kirk's assassination, is still true. Our two simultaneous priorities are leftism. That is a clear threat to our well-being. Even if you don't believe that Charlie Kirk was assassinated or who assassinated him, whichever opinion you have, it's very clear that the response to the death or hoax of Charlie Kirk's death, we saw hundreds of thousands of radical leftists celebrating his murder, glad that he is dead, proud of the shooter, hoping this happens again to people like Charlie Kirk, and especially to people even further right than Charlie Kirk. So that is a clear and present danger that we must understand, we must fight back against. That doesn't change no matter what opinion you have about the assassination. No matter what opinion you have about the assassination, the other thing that doesn't change is that Jewish influence is real. The foreign nation of Israel is way, way over involved in the domestic affairs and international affairs of America. You have Jewish billionaires in America doing things like stomping out, quote, anti-Semitism on college campuses, trying to pass hate speech laws in our federal government, using our tax dollars to pay for the well-being of Israelis, giving them free education, free health care, sending them billions and billions and billions of dollars in weaponry to orchestrate their greater Israel agenda, getting us to bomb Iran, ruin our reputation on the world stage. The entire world thinks we're personally funding a genocide. We don't have to do 100 years of history of America and Israel's relationship to be reminded that, yeah, Jewish influence is real. Nick having a contrarian opinion about this one event and whether or not Israel had its hand in it, the very same night, the next day, the next day, the next day, and even on Patrick Bet-David's interview, Nick reiterated all of the same points. That Jewish influence, the foreign nation of Israel, these things are subverting the agenda of America first. They are not good for white people. They are not good for Christians, and they're not good for America. Oh, but he got the call. Okay, so he got the call, and the call was an agreement that what? You're not going to blame Israel for Charlie Kirk, but you're going to continue to talk about Talmudic rabbinic Judaism being anti-Christian, and you're going to continue to talk about race realism and how white civilization must be protected, our countries must be majority white, led by white people. That's the agreement that the Mossad made with Nick. That's what they paid him $150 million to agree to. How does that make sense? I mean, in a super chat last night, he responded at length, 6-7 straight minutes of the 2,000 years of history, going back from putting Christ on the cross to the Jewish rebellions against the Romans, to the Pale of Settlement in Russia, to the Spanish Inquisition, to the Holocaust. He explained the larger picture of Jewish people being anti-European, anti-Christian. This has been this way for millennia. It's nothing new. It's not going to change. It must be talked about openly. Does that sound like somebody who got the call from Mossad, who took $150 million to not bring these things up again? Use your brain, people. So anybody who is clipping Nick in this whole, oh, the low IQ anti-Semitism thing is out of control, let me explain that for you. When Nick made that comment, it was in a context. It was part of a larger conversation, okay? What was that conversation? That conversation was saying, what is not helpful right now is, as part of the growing exposure, millions of new people coming into the fold, understanding Jewish influence and Israel's capture of our nation, what is not helpful is for people who are brand new to that understanding, who can't articulate the 2,000 years of history, who haven't done the research on the Talmud, for them to come in and just start blaming everything on Israel. that does actually undermine our credibility as a movement, because our movement is highly educated historically, highly educated biblically. All of our arguments are morally and biblically unimpeachable. They're based on receipts and evidence. And so here's a good example where I saw it, the light bulb came on immediately. Because at first I was like, yeah, Nick, that's probably not the best thing to say right now, calling your own followers low IQ anti-Semites because they didn't agree with you on Israel. And I kind of got what he was saying about it, but I was still like, I don't know if I agree with that. But what he said is low IQ anti-Semitism is real, and it is a real problem. That's not him saying all anti-Semitism is low IQ. Do you understand the difference? If not, let me explain it to you. And I'm going to make a very important analogy that'll make this simple to understand. First, one of the examples that I saw on Instagram, I don't even know his name, just some random stand-up comedian. Not a super successful one either. Low follower count. Just happened to come across my feed. He's doing his stand-up. He's at some dive bar. And he's talking about how none of us can trust the government, right? Ooh, look what they said about COVID. Then he provides some other examples. Do you believe what they said about 9/11? Do you believe what they said about Epstein? Do you know one other example where you clearly can't trust the government when they say Israel didn't kill Charlie Kirk? And then the entire audience starts laughing. Oh, ha, ha, ha. It's so funny. We can't trust the government when they talk about Israel. Okay, this is an audience at 11 or 12 p.m., maybe 1 a.m. in the morning. Most of them are drunk. It's a dive bar, and everybody is laughing about, let's just blame the Jews for XYZ problem. Is it true? Maybe. We don't know if Israel had a hand in it. There's plenty of circumstantial evidence to suggest maybe. But the point is, I can guarantee you that small dive bar audience of 50 people, they haven't read the Talmud, or at least the parts of it that talk about Jesus, Mother Mary, Goyim, the greatest hits of the Talmud. They haven't read Henry Ford's The International Jew. They haven't read John Chrysostom's homilies against the Jews. They haven't read Against Our Better Judgment. They haven't read Ron Unz's American Pravda. They haven't read Martin Luther's The Jews and Their Lies. They haven't actually done the education necessary to understand the full extent of the Jewish problem. But right now, they get that understanding loosely that Israel is influencing America far too much. I'm uncomfortable with that. Somebody made a joke about Israel doing too much. Ha ha ha, that's funny. All right. That's not the same as a movement, a political movement that is ready to articulate the 2,000-year history of Christians and Jews and them being anti-European. Do you understand? The drunken guy laughing about how Epstein was Mossad, they did 9/11, they killed JFK, and yeah, they probably killed Charlie Kirk. That's not the same. We can't take those two things to be the same caliber of discourse. The America First movement is a discourse about the intellectual theory that Jews internationally are a nepotistic people. They didn't have a nation of their own for 2,000 years. They have a historical grievance against many European countries. They call them Amalek. They believe that the way to bring about their Messiah is through destroying Amalek, creating the third temple. They see all non-Jews as Goyim. We don't have to do that whole dissertation right here, right now. But they can't. They couldn't even possibly broach that dissertation. And so while we may want their support, while everybody is welcome to talk about the Jewish problem and to propagate more and more information to bring people up to speed, we do have to be careful that the genuinely low IQ people, and here's the analogy I want to make, look at racism, quote racism, whatever that is to you, whatever that's supposed to mean. We can all agree that there are articulate, intelligent people like Jared Taylor, Sam Francis, Nick Fuentes. I would consider myself one of these people who can talk at great length for hours about race realism and how this position, this understanding that the races are not only genetically different, but they have different cultures, they have different histories, they have different priorities and ways of life. And to acknowledge that difference has nothing to do with hatred. To have a preference for your own race, your own extended kin, has nothing to do with hatred or bigotry or xenophobia or whatever racism is supposed to mean. There are people who have the intellectual capacity and the gift of articulation to lay out the case for race realism and discuss how segregation is completely moral and would actually reduce the amount of conflict interracially. There are people who can do that, and they make the argument for race realism and segregation very appealing, especially to their fellow white people. That's why I have a following of over 100,000 people. That's why Nick has a following of more than 500,000 people. That's why people have listened to Jared Taylor for 30 years. Because they can take a controversial subject and deliver it in a way that is understandable to even those who oppose it. And they can get them to agree that, okay, I understand. This is actually about preference. It has nothing to do with hatred. It's not anti-biblical. It's not immoral. There are people who can talk about black culture being different than European culture, it being different than Jewish culture, Asian culture, Indian culture, Hispanic culture, Arab culture. They all have their own unique attributes, and it's okay for the people, respectively, of each of those groups to prefer their own. That's a morally sound, intellectually sound argument to make. Do you see how that is different than the redneck trailer trash guy who just says, I just fucking hate blacks? Okay, is that the guy you want advancing the segregation cause? Is that the guy you want representing this conversation about race? Oh, I just fucking hate Jews. I hate Hispanics. I hate all non-whites. In this, in that. Do you see how important it is to highlight the low IQ version of being racially conscious, what you might call racism, versus the high IQ version of being a racially conscious person, or what you would still be accused as a racist? The same applies to anti-Semitism. And what Nick is pointing out is there's lots of people coming into the conversation right now who are the, as I called them, the trailer park, redneck, white trash people who don't have the ability to articulate. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying they're immoral. I'm saying they genuinely don't have the capability to articulate the cause for the separation of the races, allow each other freedom of association. They don't even know those words. And so, yes, it is fair for Nick to point out at this point in time, when we have more disclosure ever on the Jewish problem, that at this point in time, the people put into the positions of leadership to articulate this problem, we need to be very wary of not allowing the spotlight to be shown on these people who just run around blaming literally everything on the Jews. You have a bad day, it's the Jews. Your girlfriend breaks up with you, it's the Jews. And I understand you can make arguments. Well, that's because of feminism. That's because of the subversion of the media and the subversion of the demographics. And yeah, those are traced back to Jews. Okay, I get it. But you also understand, I hope, that there are plenty of people who genuinely can't trace back the social ills of feminism, abortion, pornography, prostitution, open borders, communism, socialism. They don't actually have the historical knowledge, the education required to fully articulate Jewish influence, its many cultural ties to the subversion of Western civilization, it being an anti-Christian culture. So, we need to carefully separate the two. And I don't mean separate as in we're not on the same team. I mean separate those who are put into positions of influence to represent moving these problems forward and solving them. Those people need to be given their proper attention. And those others, hey, appreciate that you're in alignment with the objective. Leave the conversation to me, though, okay? That's probably for the best. We don't need you out there marching in parades, waving Nazi swastika flags around like, what do they call the blood tribe? Okay, that's not really helpful to our cause. Just like it's not really helpful for our cause for you to go out there screaming the N-word at every black person you see. Yeah, I think you have the freedom to do that. No, I don't think you should be fired from your job from doing that. But I do have the intellectual understanding to understand that that's not really moving things forward. So that's what I wanted to address. This whole clip of Nick talking about low IQ anti-Semitism being a genuine problem, that's because it is a genuine problem. The same way low IQ racism is a genuine problem because it misrepresents the moral character and the moral backing, the intellectual backing to address the racial situation and likewise to address the Jewish situation. I know this is like way beyond what some people can absorb. They want a simple take. They want to hear the 30-second thing and say, what? Nick called his own supporters low IQ anti-Semites? I guess Nick is flipped. He got the call from Mossad. That's not what happened. And you need to understand that these clips are being intentionally segmented and promoted across social media by people who want to take the torch from Nick. They're jealous or they want to take things in a different direction. Maybe they're prideful. They want the attention themselves. They want to be seen edgy, whatever it may be. No, nobody is taking the torch in terms of the leadership of America First. No, nobody has a better understanding or ability to articulate the situation better than Nick Fuentes. No, it is not undermining the mission or undermining Nick's credibility when he has to raise capital to scale America First. That might mean doing some ad reads. Heaven forbid. I think I have laid out everything for you guys. A couple other clips that are taken from the Patrick Bet-David interview that are being positioned as, oh, look, Nick is suddenly flip-flopping on the Jews. Patrick Bet-David asked him, which has a more gross negative impact on America, Muslims or Jews? Nick says Muslims. What? I thought Nick was our anti-Jew guy, but he just said Muslims are even worse than Jews. Nick has been talking for 10 years about how bad Jews are for America. I guess he's flip-flopped. I guess he got the call. Did you listen to the rest of the clip, or did you just respond to the 30 seconds that were clipped, intentionally taking that out of context? The rest of that clip, over the next 3 minutes, Nick then elaborates and portrays how Patrick Bet-David just gave him a false dichotomy and said, you know what, it's not a matter of a gross advantage in terms of Jews versus Muslims and their contributions to America. What we should really be looking at is the net advantage or disadvantage. Do you understand the difference between gross and net? Have you ever done some very basic accounting or math in your life? At a gross level, Jews have contributed some things that you might appreciate in America. In the arts, and honestly, in my opinion, that's pretty much it. There's been some Jewish scientists who have delivered some significant progress and innovations and technology, stuff like that. So, okay, art, science, technology, have intellectual Jewish people moved those things forward and brought good things to America? Yeah, sure. That's fine. At a gross level, there have been some positive things coming from Jews. But gross means you take the additions and then you subtract out the negatives. That's how you get to your net value. Gross is all of the additions. Your net value is, okay, now let's subtract out all of the costs. And all of the costs, and this is what Nick says, well, Patrick, at a gross level, sure, Jews have had all of these positive impacts. Technology, art, whatever. Science. But when you subtract out the demographic subversion, when you subtract out how they have used their positions in media to put forth an anti-Christian information diet, when you subtract out the foreign lobbying of AIPAC and Jewish billionaires financing these perpetual wars in Israel, having 3,000 Americans die on 9/11, tens of thousands of more deaths in the ensuing wars in the Middle East, 1 million dead Arabs, a ruined reputation on the world stage, a completely destroyed currency. Look at the push for feminism. We have negative birth rates. More marriages fail than succeed. Nick accounts for the negative side very openly and transparently on Patrick Bet-David. Wait a minute, I thought this guy got the call from the Mossad. But here he is attributing all these cultural ills and saying, actually, Jews have had a net negative on America. He says this 60 seconds later after saying, well, on a gross level, Jews have been more beneficial than Muslims. But on a net level, when you listen to the rest of the clip, there's the guy who got the call from the Mossad saying, yeah, Jews have been unequivocally, empirically, you can prove it, a negative net harm on America. As with everything, there's some nuance here. Patrick asked him a question. Okay, I can kind of understand that. But here's another question, a hypothetical for you. When you're looking at a neighborhood to live in, which would you rather live in? A neighborhood with a bunch of Muslims or a neighborhood with a bunch of Jews? Dearborn, Michigan, or Boca Raton, Florida? Well, we all know the answer to that question. If you're being honest, as you should be, yeah, of course, you're going to want to live around the more Jewish representation neighborhood than the ones who are having calls to prayer, multiple wives, so on and so forth. Jews are a much higher contribution to the economy. They are much more legally obedient. Do they have all of these other conflicts of interest in terms of the political agendas and the international affairs that they lobby for and this nepotistic nature that are bad? Yes. But living in a neighborhood with them, that's the question that was asked, is obviously going to be safer. You're going to feel more comfortable living in a neighborhood with Jews in it than with a bunch of Muslims. If you can't agree with that, then you're just being intentionally low IQ anti-Semitic. And that word to me doesn't even mean anything, but it connects back to the point that I was making earlier, that having this reflexive response, no matter what the case may be, there has to be something always negative to say about Jews. That's low IQ anti-Semitism, if you believe anti-Semitism could be a social construct that explains sentiment towards Jews. It's not a question about morality or anything like that. It's simply saying when you look at the response to Jews, how do people respond to them? You do have people who, no matter when the word Jew comes up, bam, it's let me find a way to take this in the bad direction. And those aren't the people we need. I'm not saying they're bad people, and I'm not even saying they're wrong. What I'm saying is that those are a different level of communicators than those who are able to articulate the full extent of the problem, do so rationally, biblically, unimpeachably. They can even bring the biblical receipts. So that's the Patrick Bet-David interview. That's the slander campaign that is currently being run against Nick Fuentes. They're trying to divide the Groypers within themselves and get them to betray Nick. And we should be actively, diligently recording every individual who is putting forth this allegation that Nick has flipped, because it's provably false. On his own show, ever since Charlie Kirk got assassinated, he has continued to articulate at length every single micro component of Jewish influence. And he has continued to stand for white people. Nothing has changed. He disagreed with you about possibly Israel being involved in Charlie Kirk's assassination. He hasn't even ruled it out. He still says he's open to the possibility. If hardcore, tangible evidence surfaces, then maybe he'll change his position on that too. But big picture, nothing has changed. And so we still are loyal. We still have faith. We still recognize that Nick is, without question, the strongest voice, the strongest opportunity that we have to represent whites and defend whites and to expose the Jewish influence problem nationwide, to get people behind that. We don't need them all to be as articulate. What we do need them to do is to not subvert us on the race subject or the Jewish subject by going out there and acting retarded. That's the simple explanation. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed my deconstruction of these things. Hopefully they provide some perspective for you. Until the next time, I got to wrap this show up. Got to get in the gym, have myself this leg day. By the way, we are hitting 100,000 followers either tonight or tomorrow. That's the current trajectory. Huge, huge milestone. You know, this is the big one because you don't get another milestone until maybe 250,000. numerically, you know, it's just kind of weird to celebrate like 150K or 175 or 200. $250,000, that's a big deal. Then you'll get to $500,000, that's a big deal. And then the million is really big. But crossing over 100,000, that's definitely worth celebrating. And this vlog will probably drop right as I cross 100,000. So I guess this is our celebratory vlog, you guys. We did it. How did we do it? By defending white people, by calling out Jewish influence, by talking about the woman problem, by being articulate and confident and unapologetic about these subjects. We did it, man. 100,000 and going strong. We ain't done. We ain't nowhere near done. So that's the Southerner coming out in me, using some grammatically incorrect speech. I hope Nick doesn't just discard me as a groiper. My feelings are going to be so hurt. Anyway, take care of yourselves, you guys. Love you. America first, and Christ is King.
The few brave men who have actually tried to go out and do something about white genocide or talk about Jewish influence, the Zionist-occupied government, we all know that they get crucified, their careers get destroyed, and so we need to find ways to support each other. One of the ways that I have done that is by creating my Substack, where there are exclusive early access to documentaries, my weekly vlogs, there are ebooks there. There's even an opportunity to set up a one-on-one 30-minute Ask Me Anything if you'd like. All of the proceeds from my Substack, from my YouTube channel, from the merch gets reinvested in the platform. I use that to pay my employees. I use that to buy the equipment that I need, the cameras, the lights, the MacBook, all the books, all of the software, pay for marketing, everything else, but also it protects my literal life. So if you want to help out, please do head on to Substack, get yourself a subscription. Thank you. I appreciate it. America first, and Christ is King.